How I stopped spending fortunes on therapy using free wisdom. I used to spend 500 reais an hour on therapy that only made me more anxious. I would leave the office with more questions than answers, and my bank account bleeding. Brazil is a world leader in anxiety, with 9.3% of the population suffering from this condition. We are also one of the countries that consumes the most antidepressants in the world. I was just another one in those terrifying statistics, until I discovered that the solution wasn't found on an expensive couch, but in an ancient wisdom that anyone can access for free. My journey began in the worst possible way. I woke up every day with a tightness in my chest that felt like it was suffocating me. The nights were a nightmare of insomnia and obsessive thoughts. I sought professional help, of course. After all, everyone says therapy is essential, right? I found a renowned psychologist who charged 500 reais per session. I thought the high price would guarantee quality. How wrong I was. In the first few sessions, she made me talk about my childhood, my traumas, my fears. I left there feeling like a disassembled car, with parts scattered all over the floor. Week after week, I spent money I barely had, waiting for some magical revelation to emerge. But it never did. The panic attacks continued. The anxiety only got worse. And my financial situation plummeted along with my mental health. After 6 months and over 10,000 reais spent, I was worse than before. Therapy had become another source of stress in my life. I felt guilty for not getting better, as if it were my fault for not being able to make the most of those expensive sessions. The therapist suggested increasing the frequency of our meetings. More money, more time, more frustration. That was when I put my foot down and decided I needed a different approach. I started researching alternatives. I read about meditation, mindfulness, and Eastern philosophies. At first, I confess I turned my nose up at it. It seemed like hippie stuff, you know. But the situation was so desperate that I decided to give it a chance. I downloaded some free apps, started reading about Buddhism, and watched YouTube videos on meditation. The first thing that caught my attention in Buddhist teachings was the simplicity. There was no complicated jargon, elaborate theories, or wild interpretations of my dreams. It went straight to the point. Suffering exists, it has a cause, and there is a path to get out of it. Simple as that. No more spending years digging up childhood traumas or analyzing every word my mother said when I was 5. The principles of transformation. The first principle that changed my life was acceptance. In Buddhism, they teach that resistance to what is happening is the true source of suffering. I spent hours fighting my anxiety, trying to control it, deny it, or hide it. It was like trying to hold water in your hands. The tighter I squeezed, the more it escaped. When I learned to accept that the anxiety was there, without judgment, something magical happened. It began to lose its power. Meditation was the second game changer. I started with just 5 minutes a day, using free apps like Insight Timer. In the beginning, my mind was a hurricane of thoughts. But gradually, I learned to observe these thoughts without identifying with them. It was like sitting on the bank of a river and watching the leaves drift by in the current. The anxious thoughts kept arising, but I no longer needed to jump into the river and be swept away by them. I discovered that Brazil has one of the highest depression rates in Latin America, with 5.8% of the population affected. 70% of Brazilians cannot access therapy because of the cost. I was part of that cruel statistic. But Buddhist principles were right there, available to anyone with internet access. It was democratized knowledge. Without financial barriers. The third principle that saved me was impermanence. Everything passes. This simple phrase revolutionized my relationship with anxiety attacks. Before, when I felt the tightness in my chest begin, would panic, thinking it would last forever. Now, I reminded myself that everything is temporary. Anxiety comes, reaches its peak, and goes away. Always. Without exception. This certainty gave me an anchor in the middle of the storm. I began practicing mindfulness in my daily life. Instead of living on autopilot, I paid attention to every action. When I washed the dishes, I felt the water on my hands, the smell of the soap, the movement of my arms. When I walked, I observed every step, every breath. This simple practice brought me back to the present moment, taking me out of the vicious cycle of worries about the future and ruminations about the past. Conscious breathing became my emergency tool. Every time I felt anxiety rising, I stopped everything and focused on my breath. I inhaled for a count of 4, held for 4, and exhaled for 6. It was like having a reset button always at hand. Free, available 24 hours a day, and without side effects. The fourth transformative principle was compassion. In Buddhism, they teach that we should treat ourselves with the same kindness we would treat a good friend. I was my own worst critic, punishing myself for every anxiety attack, for every moment of weakness. I learned to speak to myself with affection, to forgive myself for my imperfections. This change in internal dialogue was fundamental to my healing. I discovered that recent studies show that mindfulness meditation can reduce anxiety symptoms by 40 to 60% after just 8 weeks of practice. This is more effective than many medications, without the side effects and without the cost. Neuroscience proves that meditation physically alters the brain, strengthening areas related to well-being and decreasing activity in the amygdala, which is responsible for the fear response. The fifth principle that set me free was detachment. Not detachment in the sense of not caring about anything, but rather not clinging obsessively to results. I lived on an emotional roller coaster, soaring to the clouds when things went well and plunging into the abyss when something went wrong. I learned that true happiness comes from within, not from external circumstances. This gave me an emotional stability I had never experienced before. The practice of gratitude became part of my daily routine. Every day, before going to sleep, I listed 3 things I was grateful for. They could be simple things: breakfast, a good conversation, the sunset. This practice rewires the brain to focus on the positive, instead of looking for problems all the time. It's incredible how our minds change when we train them to see what is working, instead of only seeing what is broken. The sixth principle was interdependence. In Buddhism, they teach that everything is connected. My anxiety wasn't just my fault, but the result of a series of factors: a stressful society, social pressures, consumer culture, and constant comparisons on social media. Understanding this took the weight of individual guilt off me and helped me have a more compassionate view of my condition. I learned about the concept of the beginner's mind. Instead of thinking I already knew everything about myself, I started observing myself with curiosity, as if I were meeting myself for the first time. Every anxiety crisis became a learning opportunity, not a personal failure. This shift in perspective transformed my relationship with myself. The practice of loving kindness, or metta, was another turning point. It's a meditation where you send good wishes to yourself, then to loved ones, then to neutral people, then to difficult people, and finally to all beings. It sounds silly, but this practice developed a capacity for love and compassion in me that I didn't even know existed. And the best part, it was totally free. The seventh principle that healed me was the wisdom of non-action. Not everything in life needs an immediate reaction. I learned that sometimes the best response is not to respond. When I felt anxiety, instead of chasing distractions or desperate solutions, I simply stayed with the feeling, observing it without judgment. Most of the time, it dissolved on its own. I discovered that Brazil has free mindfulness programs in the public health system, SUS, based on Buddhist principles. Thousands of people are being helped without spending a penny. Meanwhile, we continue to be one of the countries that consumes the most antidepressants in the world. There is something wrong with this equation. We are looking for expensive solutions to problems that can be solved with free wisdom. The practice of observing thoughts became my superpower. I learned that I am not my thoughts. They arise in my mind, but they do not define me. It's like clouds passing through the sky. The sky remains blue, regardless of the clouds. My essence remains intact, regardless of the anxious thoughts that may arise. The eighth transformative principle was the middle way. In Buddhism, they teach about the middle path, avoiding extremes. I used to live in extremes. I was either euphoric or devastated. I either worked 16 hours a day or wouldn't get out of bed. I learned to find balance, to live in the center, where there is peace and stability. The practice of meditative walking became my daily free therapy. Instead of staying locked at home ruminating on negative thoughts, I went out for walks, paying attention to every step, every breath, and every sound around me. Nature became my office, movement became my therapist. Zero cost, infinite benefits. I learned about the concept of optional suffering. Pain is inevitable in life, but suffering is optional. Pain is what happens, suffering is the story we tell ourselves about what happens. When I lost a job, the pain of loss was inevitable. But spending 3 months mentally torturing myself with thoughts like, I'm a failure, or I'll never find another job, was optional suffering. I learned to feel the pain without adding unnecessary layers of mental distress. The ninth principle that changed my life was the practice of generosity. I started helping others going through the same situation as me. I shared what I had learned, offered a word of support, and practiced compassionate listening. I discovered that helping others was one of the best therapies for myself. And it was free. Meditation on death might seem morbid, but it was liberating. Reflecting on the impermanence of life helped me put things in perspective. That presentation at work that had me panicking. In 100 years, no one will remember. That argument that kept me awake. Insignificant in the grand scale of existence. This practice gave me a lightness that no therapy had ever achieved. The 10th and final principle that saved me was the practice of presence. I stopped living in the future, worried about what might happen, or in the past, regretting what had already gone. I learned to be truly present in the now. And I found that in the present, at this very moment, usually, everything is fine. Anxiety lives in the future, depression in the past. In the present, there is peace. After a year of practicing these Buddhist principles, my life changed completely. The panic attacks vanished. Anxiety still shows up sometimes, but it doesn't control me anymore. I sleep well, I work with focus, and I relate better to people. And best of all, I didn't spend a cent more than I already had. Meanwhile, I kept seeing friends spending fortunes on therapies that didn't really help them. I'm not saying therapy is bad. For some severe cases, it is essential. But for most of us, suffering from mild to moderate anxiety and depression, Buddhist principles offer more effective and accessible tools. Today, when I wake up, I feel gratitude. When I face challenges, I have the tools to handle them. When I feel difficult emotions, I know they will pass. I no longer need a therapist to tell me how to feel better. I have ancient wisdom at my fingertips, tested by millions over centuries. If you are going through what I went through, know there is a way out. You don't need to spend fortunes or stay years in therapy that doesn't work. Buddhist principles are there, free, waiting for you. Start slowly. Download a meditation app. Read a book on mindfulness. Practice acceptance. Observe your thoughts without judgment. Healing is within your reach. My journey taught me that true therapy doesn't happen in an expensive office, but in our daily relationship with life. Every moment is an opportunity to practice presence, compassion, and acceptance. Every breath is a chance to reconnect with inner peace. Every challenge is an invitation to apply Buddhist wisdom. Brazil may be a world leader in anxiety, but it can also be a world leader in wisdom. We have access to teachings that can heal us, free us, and transform us. We just need the courage to try, to step out of the comfort zone of expensive solutions and embrace the deep simplicity of Buddhist principles. So, if you've made it this far, leave a comment about which Buddhist principle caught your attention most. Tell us about your experience with anxiety and depression. Let's create a community of mutual support, based on the free wisdom available to all of us. Subscribe to the channel for more content on how to live better while spending less. And give it a like if this video helped you in some way. Remember, you're not alone on this journey, and true healing might be closer than you imagine. And look, I want to be very transparent with you about something the mental health industry doesn't like to admit. Often, what we call anxiety and depression are symptoms of a lifestyle completely misaligned with our human nature. We live in a society that forces us to be productive 24 hours a day, bombards us with information, and disconnects us from nature, genuine relationships, and our own inner selves. Buddhism doesn't see anxiety as a disease to be medicated, but as a sign that we are living disharmoniously. It's like an internal alarm saying, "Hey, you're going in the wrong direction." And instead of turning off the alarm with pills, Buddhism teaches us to understand the message and change direction. Let me tell you about another fundamental concept, detachment. It's not about not caring about anything, as many people think. It's about not desperately clinging to results, people, or situations. Anxiety, most of the time, comes from our excessive attachment to how we want things to be. You get anxious because you want to control the outcome of a job interview. You get depressed because you cling to the idea of how your life should be. Buddhism teaches that suffering is born precisely from this attachment, this resistance to what is. When you learn to do your part and let go of the result, anxiety naturally decreases. I remember a time when I got anxious just about posting a YouTube video. I was obsessed with how many views it would get, how many likes, how many negative comments. It was constant suffering. When I started practicing detachment, everything changed. I do my best on the video, post it, and let go. Whatever comes, comes. This shift in mindset was revolutionary for my mental health. And there's another crucial point I need to address, self-compassion. Traditional therapy sometimes spends years trying to make you understand why you are the way you are, digging up traumas, analyzing childhood. Buddhism has a more practical approach: accept that you are human, that you will make mistakes, that you will have hard times, and treat yourself with the same kindness you would treat a dear friend. Buddhist self-compassion is different from the self-esteem the modern world preaches. Self-esteem depends on you feeling special, better than others, or achieving things. Self-compassion is unconditional. You deserve love and care simply for existing, regardless of your successes or failures. How many times do you mentally insult yourself when you make a mistake? How many times do you punish yourself with cruel thoughts? That's the opposite of Buddhist compassion. When you learn to be kind to yourself, anxiety and depression lose much of their power over you. Now, let me say something that might sound controversial but needs to be said. Not every sadness is depression, and not every worry is anxiety. We live in a society that has pathologized normal human emotions. It's normal to be sad when something bad happens. It's normal to worry about important things. The problem is when these emotions become chronic and disproportionate. Buddhism teaches that emotions are like clouds in the sky of consciousness. They come and go. The mistake is to identify completely with them. I am an anxious person becomes an identity. I am depressed becomes who you are. But you are not your emotions. You are the consciousness that observes these emotions passing through. This perspective is liberating because it takes the weight off the sick identity. You don't need to carry anxiety as if it were part of your personality. It's just a temporary visitor in the house of your mind. And like any visitor, eventually, it leaves. There's a simple Buddhist exercise that changed my life. When a difficult emotion arises, instead of resisting or identifying with it, I simply say, "Ah, anxiety has arrived for a visit. Hi, anxiety. You can stay there. But I'm not giving you all my attention." It sounds silly, but it works better than any expensive technique I learned in therapy. And look, I need to talk about something that bothers me deeply, how the pharmaceutical industry took advantage of our spiritual disconnection to sell chemical solutions. I'm not saying medications are never necessary, but I am saying they've become the first option when they should be the last. Buddhism has existed for over 2,500 years, helping people deal with mental suffering without needing a single pill. Generations upon generations of human beings found peace, balance, and happiness through spiritual practice. But suddenly, in recent decades, they convinced us that we need expensive drugs to be happy. It's interesting how countries where Buddhism is still strong, like Bhutan, have much lower rates of anxiety and depression. Coincidence? I don't think so. When you have a philosophy of life that teaches you how to handle suffering, you don't need so many external crutches. Let me share with you the 5 basic Buddhist precepts that can revolutionize your mental health. First, avoid causing unnecessary harm. This includes not hurting yourself mentally with destructive thoughts. Second, don't take what isn't yours. This includes not comparing yourself to others and wanting their lives. Third, avoid sexual misconduct. This includes not getting involved in relationships that hurt you. Fourth, don't lie. This includes being honest with yourself about your feelings. Fifth, avoid substances that cloud the mind. This includes not running away from problems with addictions. These precepts are like a code of conduct for a mentally healthy life. When you follow them, you naturally create less suffering for yourself. It's anxiety and depression prevention in practice. Now, I want to talk about something that maybe is the most important, the Sangha, or spiritual community. One of the great problems of modern society is isolation. We live disconnected from one another, each fighting their internal demons alone. Buddhism has always emphasized the importance of community on the spiritual path. When you have a Sangha, a group of people sharing the same values and practices, the weight of suffering gets lighter. You realize you're not alone, that others face the same difficulties, and that it's possible to overcome them. This is more therapeutic than any expensive individual session. And look how interesting, you can create your own Sangha for free. Get together with friends interested in personal growth. Do group meditations. Share books on Buddhism. Talk about your practices and challenges. This support network based on ancient wisdom can be more effective than years of traditional therapy. I have a group of friends that meets every week to meditate and talk about Buddhist philosophy. We don't pay anything besides the snack each one brings. But the therapeutic value of these meetings is immeasurable. We have mutual support, joint growth, shared wisdom. It's free and effective therapy. Let me also talk about something few therapists will teach you, the power of impermanence. Everything in life is temporary. Your pain, your fears, your worries, everything will pass. When you truly internalize this, anxiety loses much of its power. Are you going through a hard time? It will pass. Afraid of the future? The future you imagine probably won't even happen. Stuck in a bad situation? Nothing is permanent. This perspective of impermanence is incredibly liberating and doesn't cost a cent to be applied. I often say to myself when I'm in a difficult situation, this too shall pass. And it always passes. Always. Sometimes it takes longer, sometimes less, but it always passes. This certainty of impermanence gives me a peace that no medicine could provide. And there's another fundamental aspect I want to address. Personal responsibility. Buddhism doesn't put you in the role of a victim of your circumstances or your genetics. It empowers you, it shows you that you have the power to change your relationship with suffering. Of course, there are external factors that influence our mental health. But Buddhism focuses on what you can control, your mind, your reactions, your choices. This is much more empowering than waiting for a therapist or a pill to solve your problems. Don't get me wrong, I'm not against therapy or medication when truly necessary. But Buddhism gives you the tools to be the protagonist of your own healing, not a passive spectator. Thoughts as clouds. There's a Buddhist practice that completely changed my relationship with negative thoughts, observing thoughts like clouds in the sky. Have you ever noticed how clouds appear, change shape, and disappear? Thoughts are exactly like that. They aren't you, they are just temporary phenomena passing through your consciousness. When you can observe your thoughts this way, they lose the power to control you. You don't need to fight them or try to eliminate them. Just observe, acknowledge, and let go. It's like sitting on a riverbank watching leaves drift by in the current. You don't need to jump into the river to catch every leaf. This technique saved me from countless anxiety spirals. Before, when a negative thought appeared, I would panic, try to fight it, and end up creating even more mental turbulence. Now I simply think, oh, here comes a thought about worrying for the future. Interesting. And I let it pass. The power of gratitude. Let's talk about something that is pure gold in Buddhism, the practice of conscious gratitude. I'm not talking about those superficial gratitude lists that became a trend on Instagram. I'm talking about deep, contemplative gratitude that actually changes your brain chemistry. Every day, preferably in the morning, I dedicate a few minutes to deeply contemplate 3 things I am grateful for. Not just listing them, but really feeling the gratitude in my body. Thanking for the air I breathe, the water I drink, the people I love. When you do this consistently, your mind starts naturally looking for good things instead of focusing only on problems. Neuroscience has already proven that regular gratitude increases the production of serotonin and dopamine, the same neurotransmitters that many antidepressants try to regulate artificially. You are literally reprogramming your brain for happiness, and it costs nothing. Beginner's mind. Another Buddhist treasure is the concept of beginner's mind. How many times does our anxiety come from thinking we know how things are going to be? It will go wrong, I won't succeed, it will be terrible. Beginner's mind invites you to approach every situation with curiosity instead of preconceived judgments. When you go to an important meeting, instead of creating 1,000 catastrophic scenarios in your head, how about thinking, I'm going to find out how it will be. This simple shift in perspective drastically reduces anticipatory anxiety. You stop fighting imaginary futures and become present for what is actually happening. Contemplating impermanence. There's a Buddhist exercise I do when I'm very stressed that is absolutely revolutionary, the contemplation of death. It might seem morbid, but it's deeply liberating. When you truly contemplate that one day you will die, that we all will die, your everyday worries gain a completely different perspective. That argument at work that was keeping you awake. Will it matter when you're on your deathbed? That person who criticized you on social media. That bill that's late. The contemplation of death isn't depressive, it's liberating. It shows you what truly matters and what is just noise. I usually do this exercise. I imagine I only have 1 year left to live. How would I spend my time? What would I worry about? What would I prioritize? Invariably, I realize I'm wasting mental energy on completely irrelevant things. Self-compassion and presence. Buddhism also teaches something that Western psychology is just beginning to discover, the importance of self-compassion. We are our own worst critics. We speak to ourselves in a way we would never speak to a dear friend. This constant inner criticism is a massive source of unnecessary suffering. Buddhist self-compassion isn't self-indulgence. It's treating yourself with the same kindness you would treat a child who is learning to walk and falls down. You wouldn't yell at the child, you would help them get up and keep encouraging them. When you make a mistake, instead of crushing yourself mentally, try saying, "I'm human, I make mistakes, I can learn from this and move on." There's an aspect of Buddhism that is pure preventive medicine for the mind, living in the present. Most of our suffering comes from ruminating on the past or worrying about the future. The present is rarely problematic. Right at this moment, everything is probably fine. You are breathing, your heart is beating, you have a roof over your head. The drama is in your head, not in your immediate reality. When you train your mind to return to the present, you free yourself from 90% of unnecessary suffering. A simple technique I use is the 5 senses anchor. What am I seeing? What am I hearing? What am I feeling in my body? Any smell? Any taste in my mouth? Failure and the farmer's story. Buddhism offers a revolutionary perspective on failure. Failure is seen as a teacher, an opportunity for growth. When you stop being afraid of failure, you stop living a small, defensive life. You become braver and more creative. There's a Buddhist story about a farmer whose horse ran away. The neighbors said, "How terrible." He replied, "Maybe." The next day, the horse returned with 3 wild horses. "What luck," they said. "Maybe," he replied. His son tried to tame one, fell, and broke his leg. "What bad luck," they cried. "Maybe," he said. Then, soldiers came to recruit for war but left the son because of his leg. "What luck," the neighbors shouted. And the farmer? Maybe. This story illustrates that our labels of good or bad are often premature. What looks like a tragedy today can be the doorway to an opportunity tomorrow. It means understanding that both pleasure and pain are temporary. Interconnection and identity. Buddhism also teaches us about interconnection. Nothing exists in isolation. You are part of an infinite web of connections. When you understand this, your ego diminishes and your compassion increases. You realize we are all in the same boat, all trying to navigate this difficult existence. Your problems aren't unique, they are part of the universal human condition. Finally, Buddhism approaches identity. Most of us have a fixed narrative. I am an anxious person, I am shy. Buddhism suggests these are mental constructs, not truths. You are not your thoughts or emotions. You are the consciousness that observes them. And consciousness can choose different thoughts and behaviors. This is incredibly liberating. It means you aren't stuck with your past. You can choose to be different at any moment. You also learn to deal with difficult people by working with your own mind, understanding that your inner peace shouldn't depend on how others behave. True happiness comes from within, not from external circumstances. This is a practical truth you can test in your own life starting today.